Hello and welcome to the Divorce to Bliss podcast. Here you will learn all things related to healing from divorce, mind, body, and spirit, so you can create a beautiful new life filled with happiness. I'm Rachel Ruby, author of Divorce to Bliss, divorce coach, speaker, and attorney, and I'm so glad you found me here. Hello and welcome to the Divorce to Bliss podcast. I'm Rachel Ruby. If you are watching on YouTube, please do me a favor and turn on notifications, follow, subscribe, comment, like, and share so you can continue to get more great information for your journey from divorce to bliss. Today, we are going to be talking about keeping the family intact after a marriage and what that means. My guest is Helena Gatto, and Helena is another superwoman, which I love, as you know, interviewing superwomen. Helena is the founder of Gatto Solutions, and she works with and advises clients from both public and private companies in conflict, culture, and communication. She's also an adjunct professor at USC's Saul Price School of Public Policy. She has also written the book, A Modern Family, Keeping the Family Intact When the Marriage is Over, and it's available on Amazon. So welcome, Helena, to the podcast, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, Rachel. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we all know that when a marriage ends, there are usually two kind of polar extremes as to what people do. And one is that they stay in an unhappy marriage. And a lot of that springs from fear, and we can get into that later. And the other is that they file for divorce and, usually split, go their separate ways, hire attorneys, things can get nasty, et cetera, et cetera. But you have a third option that some people may not have ever considered. So why don't you tell us all about that?
I don't think people haven't considered it. I think a lot of people actually do what I'm doing. They just do it in a less sort of open way, right?
Okay.
The polar opposites of miserably married and divorced. There is a really long time in between being miserably married and getting divorced. And I think a lot of people find themselves miserably married, and that seems like the better option than exploding their world with a divorce, so they stay there. And my third option is really just owning the fact that, hey, our marriage is over. However, we are still a family. For me, it's because, we have children. We have children. We'll be a family forever. So how do we create a way of living? We'll probably, end up in divorce. But at that point, divorce doesn't need to be this big disruptive thing. We're already there, right? Our marriage is already over. So splitting up our stuff, we can do that today, or we can do that in 5 years, or we can do that in a year. So my third option is really being open about the marriage being over. However, you're still a family, and how do you best rebuild the foundations of that family on a different foundation, and keep the family intact while you go through this process.
Yeah. And I love the idea of kind of, what that provides for the children. And I know that's the underlying importance of the whole thing, right? So the children have this stability. Mom and dad are still both around. And I read in your book that when you were talking about how you witnessed your parents going through a very unhappy marriage and how that affected you. And it seems like obviously you allude to the fact that you want to prevent that with your children. So tell me a little bit about how this option does benefit the children and how they, day to day kind of going through this, what they're experiencing compared to maybe what you experienced living in a home where there was a very unhappy relationship.
Well, so the thing that happened to me was that I didn't even know that my parents were unhappy. We were keeping up appearances. They were keeping up appearances for years. Okay. And with all kinds of things going on in the background. But as a 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old, I wasn't privy to that. On the outside, everything looked fine. So when they sat my brother and I down and said, hey, we're going to have a trial separation, it was like my whole world.
Yeah.
It was just a complete a rupture of reality for me. And then to have to be going through that as they were going through that and not their best selves, was incredibly difficult. And to this day, it still has had a massive negative impact on my origin, my family of origin. So I think my kids are never going to be shocked by anything. My kids have been brought along, but not brought along in details, brought along in like mommy and daddy. We're a family. We love each other. We're in a different place with our relationship, right? And to begin with, their story was, well, daddy's struggling and daddy's trying to work on himself. And then it was, mommy doesn't love dad anymore, but he's working on himself. So there's been a progression of how this has gone. And even a year ago, guys, at some point I'm going to start dating. What? But we've got a dad. And I'm like, well, I'm not getting you a new dad, right? But your dad in a marriage. So I think that's the difference. It's just being honest through the process. So the kids continue to feel secure. Most children, I think, do see it. I don't know how I didn't see it. My dad wasn't home a lot. I didn't see my parents together a lot. I didn't really realize. But I think in my family, my ex works from home. I work from home. We're all around all the time. They see it. They see the dysfunction. So for me to be able to say, yeah, this is dysfunctional. And we're working through it.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And you brought up something that I was going to ask you about, which is the dating thing, because I did read in your book when you talked about setting boundaries, and you talked about how when you went out the first time on a date and you came home and your former spouse was very, upset, or, that you had been on a date type of thing. And so how does one, I guess it really depends on the age of the children, but how does one, even though you're living in this, new kind of same but different reality with mom and dad being home but in separate rooms type of thing, how does one explain that to the children, that I am going to go on dates? Because like you said, they know that maybe your relationship has changed, but you're still both around. So how do you approach that?
This is such an amazing question, and I don't think I have the answer. I'm doing my best to navigate it. To me, it's about the process of it and being patient. I met somebody and I wanted, and I've just gone incredibly, incredibly slowly.
Yeah.
So I don't even think, I don't even know if that is relevant. It's just that it's the process of each person in the family working out how they need to process it. And they're all different ages of my boys, June. And so that's my ex, and just trying to be as honest as possible. I'm still there. I'm still in the process of they know I've got a boyfriend, but they don't know the boyfriend, and it doesn't disrupt their lives in any way. But at some point soon, it will disrupt a little bit. And what does that look like? And, the first time I went on a date, I came home at 9 p.m., and I already, I was able to put the children to bed and then manage a very disturbed father. And I was able to protect them from his rage and his anger. And had I not been in the house, that would have all still happened.
Yeah, true.
That would have still happened, just with me. I would not have been there to navigate it. Yeah. So there's that. And then the next piece, which is going to be me going away and staying away for a night, right? I'm not there yet. But that's the next scary piece. Okay, so what's going to happen? And do I lie and say I'm staying at a friend's house? I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to lie. That's my whole thing.
No, you got to stay honest with your kids. And I love the fact that, dad is there. And as long as you have set those boundaries, right, to as to what you're going to say or explain, so that there's not this discrepancy of mom saying one thing, dad saying the other. So let's kind of that sounds like a challenge. So how do you set boundaries with someone with whom you are cohabitating with, the other parent of your children? How do you set boundaries? Like if you make this choice to stay and live under one roof, it seems to me that the boundaries probably need to be established from the get-go. So how do you do that? And what are the challenges in setting those boundaries?
I think the boundaries evolve, and I think that it's important for yourself. You've got to you learn what your boundaries are.
Yeah.
As an individual, and your boundaries. Everyone's got different boundaries,
right?
And so, I don't know if this is right, and I'm not a psychiatrist, psychologist, or any of that. For me, I'm very aware of what my boundary is the moment it gets stepped over. Wow, that's not okay.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the process of realizing, okay, I want to have the mornings. I want to have the mornings with the kids. You're grumpy in the morning. You're not adding value to the family. My boundary is that you just let me do the mornings. That's a discussion.
Yeah.
And be like, hey, okay, so my boundary is that I want to do the mornings by myself. So you do 2, I do 3, you do 3, I do 2. I'm not sure, but we work that out together, and then that's the boundary.
Right.
And to maintain that boundary is because living like this for both of us at this time is the best case scenario.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the ultimate happily ever after. We'd like to still, be wildly in love and connect and all those things that you want and that happily ever after. But that's not my reality. Mm-hmm. That's not where we are now. So this is the reality, and this is the best case scenario for the whole family. So respecting each other's boundaries allows us to all get our needs met.
Yeah. So that makes total sense. It obviously, everyone's situation is going to be so different depending on all the people involved, because everyone's, like you said, processes things differently. So maybe if there's something that's important to you in the start, if you think about, gosh, one day I'm going to date and how's that going to work out? Maybe you can kind of set the boundary for now, and that can always change. But then when things come up, you can talk about it. And I think as long as both of the parties are willing to, again, just put the kids first, and that's the most important thing, then you can make it work. I mean, there's some people that obviously won't be able to do that. But I think that for those who are definitely dead set on, hey, we want the children to be as healthy as they can. And so we're going to make this happen. So talking about boundaries kind of made me think of something else. And that is the whole healing journey, because obviously I'm a healing coach. So I know for myself, and of course, every person is different, right? But when we separated and I was going through that process of starting my healing journey, that having my own space was just so important to me. Now, granted, my kids were adults, so totally different situation. But I wonder, with this way that you're talking about cohabitation, how is it challenging sometimes to be able to work on yourself and heal? I mean, it sounds like you're doing great, you're dating and all that. But let's say for someone who really needs to go through some elements of the healing process, but the former spouse is there in the house, or how do you handle that? Or does it affect you at all in your healing?
So I have my own space, which obviously is a luxury. And yes, to your point, I think that it is really important to be able to be on your own healing journey. And again, that's about knowing what you need and creating that for yourself.
Yeah.
And I went through it way before my ex went through it. And so I've been here while he's been going through it. And I'm not going to be like, it's been difficult to watch him go through what he's gone through. However, at the same time, I feel really proud of him that he's been able to go on that journey and take himself from being really shut down to really taking care of himself and being more emotionally available, and just shifting his focus to being really just committed to the family. And the kids have seen that. That's what I love. The kids have seen that as a family, we have stuck together. and it hasn't been easy. But we're all here together, and their dad is a new, improved version of himself.
That's great.
Of himself. And I really do want to just make sure I put in here that the whole concept of this is really embracing that what's best for the children is best for me, is best for my ex. What's best for my ex is best for me, is best. It's like we just want the best for each other. So whatever that looks like is different for each family. And so, like maybe your partner, your ex is really abusive. This is not a good choice. This is not what's best for the children, right?
Right.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. I mean, everybody does things differently. And you just kind of have to be willing to, again, put the children first, put them up here and figure things out. And sometimes I'm sure it's easy, and sometimes I'm sure it takes time. So just have to be patient.
And I want to say, though, I think there's a misconception that putting the kids before yourself, like taking care of yourself is also putting the kids first.
Of course.
I had a horrific experience with a therapist where I wanted to go with my ex to be, how are we going to process the fact that, I am going to be dating? If we're going to keep living like this, how do we do this? Let's go to therapy to see if we can do this, right? And the therapist said to me, so do you think that you can prioritize the children and maybe not date for a year?
Oh.
And so, because my ex was like, the therapist asked him, what's your best case? What would you like? He goes, well, I just don't think she should date anybody until the children leave home. I'm like,
that's putting yourself on hold, really.
Which is the whole point of why I'm trying to do this. Is like, I want to be a whole person and be honest.
Yeah.
And so that was the therapist's response, was like, okay, 10 years seems like a lot. How about 1 year? Could you prioritize the children for 1 year?
Wow.
And it was like,
It's very interesting because, I talk a lot about putting the self first, right? And a lot of people will come to me with questions like, well, how can I put myself first if I have children? And it's a very fine line, but you do have to, like you said, if you're, healthy, if you're eating healthy, if you're exercising, if you're socializing with your friends, those kinds of things make you a better parent, make you a better person, because they make you more whole, like you said, and that allows you to be a better parent. So I think, in the situation that you're living in, you have to be even more hyper aware, because you're dealing with not just yourself and your own healing, but your former spouse and his healing, and how that all affects the family unit. And so it's just a whole, I think, wonderful way to support everyone, but you have to have a certain mentality or mindset that you're going to be able to deal with everybody's differences and how they're handling and how they're healing. And I think, again, if you're the kind of person that can do that, that's fantastic, because I think that that's going to be a really good thing for your children in the long run as they grow older.
Yeah. And to speak to that, it's much easier to be that person 4 years ago when your marriage was miserable, but nobody had cheated. Nobody had become a raging alcoholic. Like, whatever happens between, trying to manage living in a miserable marriage, it's much easier to be that person early on than it is. It's very difficult once you've hurt each other and done all this stuff and to be the bigger person and do all of this. So I know that for you with your business, you're dealing with people who, have had to go through that and are coming out the other side of a divorce and healing then.
Yeah.
And this process is kind of trying to heal before the divorce.
Heal. Yeah. And it will be so interesting to I think you're going to have to write a second book. You kind of see, as you go down this path, how that all plays out. Because I would love to know from the perspective of healing. I just personally, I think it'd be fascinating to know in, when your kids are, I guess, older, and out of the house and that, and you're on your own and he's on his own and whatnot, how that all shaped you. Because I think it's really fascinating. I was going to ask you another question about, that was it. Kind of segue into, how do you know when to, end this cohabitation? Is it when the kids reach a certain age? Is it when, did you and your ex, did you talk about this before? Or is it just, should people set a time? What do you, give me your thoughts on that.
That's
and your experience.
Another great question. So I believe that it's literally day to day. We live like this for as long as it's best for the family.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what that looks like in a year.
Okay.
I imagine that, but this situation for my family, for us, financially, logistically, emotionally, for the children, those things that are really important and have a huge impact, this right here is the best.
Yeah.
If let's say one of us goes sideways, and let's say I start dating some dude and bringing him home and acting all wild, it's probably not best for the family anymore, right? So then this ends. But I my hope would be that we're able to maintain this until us living in two homes doesn't feel really disruptive to the children.
Yeah.
And I know that when we tried initially, it felt very disruptive. The kids wanted me when they woke up, they want dad. And so it was like, it didn't feel good for anybody. Yeah.
Interesting. So it's kind of a work in progress. And you just kind of trust your intuition, and he trusts his, and you kind of gauge how things are going by how the children are responding. And you just, so that
could have been the name of the book, Family in Process.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, I like that.
You work with people that are already through this. They're on the other side of this, right? So they're listening to this being like, well, this would have been great 4 years ago, right?
Yeah. So, most of them, yes. And sometimes people who are just going through the divorce process and maybe have separated, and are, trying to start healing. And what do I do I'm so miserable, I'm so sad, or, I think there's so much fear in splitting up this union, splitting up a marriage, especially for those like myself who went through a gray divorce, 50 or older, because there were a lot of years.
I so mean and rude. It's like a geriatric pregnancy.
Oh, it's a term, and I've done a whole podcast on it. It's a term, and gray divorce is actually a phenomena right now. Back as the last study, I think, was conducted in 2021, it said that 35% of all divorces are gray divorces. And so it's the numbers climbing, which is really interesting. And, as you mentioned in your book, and I know as well, it's about 70% of divorces are usually initiated by women. And it's the same with gray divorce. But it's interesting because when I talk to people who've gone through it, and of course I went through it, my kids were adults, like I said, there's a totally different dynamic because the kids they're not little anymore. They have their own lives. They have their own jobs. They have their, whatever. And I think a lot of people who go through gray divorce really have waited until the kids were in that situation and may have been unhappy for a very long time, but decided that, hey, I'm going to keep this family kind of intact, like you say. And, then it's just the two people. And a lot of couples realize, hey, we have nothing in common, or we're more like brother and sister. And, this isn't going to work. And so it's an interesting thing, but
the issues are completely different at that point because it's about your identity.
Yeah.
Oh, I've been married for 25, 30 years, right?
Yes.
I was miserable for 10 of them, then now we're going to split everything. So the nest egg I had for retirement is now half of what it was before. And
that's a big part of it. Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
And everything's intermingled. And so it is a very different,
it's hard. And, again, when you get attorneys, and I mean, I'm an attorney, but I know when you get attorneys involved, things can get really nastier. And, I know plenty of people who started out amicably and went down that road and got really, really nasty where they're nitpicking over, a rug or some dishes or a cat or, whatever. And you're doing kind of this social experiment, but not to call it a social, it's a family experiment, I guess. And I'd love to kind of keep in touch with you and see how it pans out as you go down that road. And
let me ask you, how long do you feel like you were, and this is a personal question, you don't have to answer it. How long were the marriage was over, right? You were staying for the children from the time that you decided, okay, this intimacy, we're different people now. Like the marriage is over. We tried and I can't see. How long was that?
I had a big epiphany when I left the country with my daughter to travel. And that really did it for me. And I had already kind of started diving a little in. So I would say probably maybe 3 years or so before we actually split. That give or take.
After the epiphany?
After the epiphany, no. After the epiphany, which was kind of the tail end of that, I had already started my own healing journey, although at the time I didn't know that's what I was doing. But I had already started diving into myself and like, who am I? Who am I? My kids are out. Like, who am I now? What do I need? What do I want? Like, let's turn the mirror on me. What do I want? And I had already started diving into that and had realized that I don't think I want this relationship. And then I had, after the trip and the epiphany, I came back and said, hey, I want a divorce. And we then agreed to spend 1 year going through therapy, both individual therapy and couples therapy, and trying to see if we could, because we were together 30 years. So trying to see if we could make this happen. And I gave it a year. I gave it a whole year and my undivided attention. And I knew very early on that I didn't think it was going to work. And I just kept going along throughout that year and really trying. But in the end, I felt that it wasn't what I needed anymore. So I think from the time I first started to the actual split, I'd say it was about 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, we all have our own journeys, right? And, you don't get married and think like, I'm going to get divorced one day, right? Nobody, I remember getting married and he and I seeing some other people when you're getting married saying that's never going to last and we'll never get divorced, right? And you just, I don't know. Until you get to that point, I think most of us don't think it's going to happen, right? There might be some people who marry for the wrong reasons and think like, oh, maybe I will divorce one day.
Crazy given the divorce rate, right?
Yeah.
What sane person goes into a marriage being like, oh yeah, this is going to last forever, because at least 60% of marriages don't, but as well. But we all think that. But I'm hearing with what you're saying is that both of us, the process of divorce is broken. Like the process of when you have children going through divorce, what happens, fighting, the kids, all of that, it's not best for the family.
Yeah.
And then divorce, a silver divorce, right? Divorcing when you've got a bunch of assets and things, and you go to the lawyers and it starts well and then it breaks. That process is broken as well. So I feel like we've both gone outside the process. You, because you're a lawyer and you understand, hey, I understand how to do this. Like, I don't need to bring that dynamic into the end of this. You did it differently because you were equipped to.
But I was also very lucky because my former spouse went along with that, right? Where a lot of people get so angry and so there's so much negativity that just kind of takes over your whole being, like body, mind, and spirit, right? And so a lot of people just get into the victim state. I'm gonna take the house. I'm gonna take the kids. And so I was very lucky that I had a partner who didn't want to go that route, that nasty route.
You did that. If you had said no to that year,
mm-hmm.
of his healing, him being in therapy and really trying, I wonder if it would have been different. Like, to me, that's the patience of honoring the relationship. You didn't like, it's over, right?
Yeah.
No, I am going to commit to you because you are so, and I think this is a big piece of it. One person's relationship is so much further down the road than the other one.
Right.
And the time that it takes to catch up, that's when a lot of damage is done. So the fact that you were like, okay, we're both in therapy, individual together, you kind of took him along. So he probably was in a place. I'm just,
yeah. I mean, but it's interesting. It's been, I think my journey through the healing was so amazing. And I went through a huge spiritual awakening. Like, I didn't even know that could happen to a person. I mean, I knew, but I didn't know what it meant really until it happened to me. And I just became so in love with me. And that is such a big part of no matter what you do, when you come to that point where you are in your marriage and you feel that it's not supporting you anymore, not working for you, no matter what you've tried or no matter what you decide, the crux of the matter is you have to learn to love yourself. And I always thought I did love myself. But until I started going through this healing process, I realized like, wow, I really haven't been loving myself because yeah, I didn't know myself. Yeah. And I think that, for me, like, this is just this gift that I was given to, I decided, I want to share this. I want to help people because so many people want to heal. They know they're supposed to heal. They want to heal, but they don't know how to start. And something else you mentioned about just the whole way that divorce has become negative and the splitting up and all that. I think one of the main reasons for that, and I talk about this in my book, is the fact that we are all programmed from a very young age by culture, religion, society, family, that we're supposed to, get married, have the white picket fence and the suburban and the 2.5 kids, and we're supposed to live happily ever after. And divorce has always been seen as such a stigma. And even though there are lots of alternatives now, like conscious uncoupling and your idea and other things, I think that there's still definitely a stigma. And a lot of people have grown up with this programming that you get married. It's not, if you're not happy, you get divorced. It's you get married. Yeah. And you do this. And so there's a lot of shame. There's so much shame. And I think that is why so many people stay in unhappy marriages, that and the fear of, what happens next? I'm so afraid. I'm so scared. Right. But yes, I think there are a lot of my greatest hope is that in time, divorce won't be seen as such a stigma. And as we see these alternatives kind of arise and people, very, famous people like Gwyneth Paltrow went through the conscious uncoupling, and that stirred a lot of people to go to the psychologist who created that program. And, things like this are really great because they show people that they don't have to do what is expected of them, whether it be from the family or the cultures, religion, whatever. Really what we need to do is we need to get to know ourselves and love ourselves so we can do what's in here. That's what's in their heart is going to be different. What's in your heart is different from what's in my heart. What I need is different from what you need. And so I really think that if we all learn to work on ourselves and love ourselves, that a lot of this shame and this stigma will hopefully, in time, I don't know if it'll ever disappear, but in time it will, I think, settle down. And maybe we'll start to see fewer divorces.
What you said about shame to me is a big piece of it, because what some people have said to me is like, well, you get on, like you're living together. Why can't you just stay married? Like, yeah, like as if I should just be able to suck it up because it's not that bad. And I find that it's hard to argue that. You're right. Okay,
but what you just said is someone said to you, you should do something. You should be able to. So that is the influence we have of our support networks telling us what we should do or we shouldn't do, right? And so many people listen to that because they think that person loves me. But if someone's telling you what you should or shouldn't do, that person doesn't truly have your best interests at heart, even if they love you, because the only person who can determine what you should or shouldn't do is you. I'm the only person who can determine what I should or shouldn't do. No one can tell me I should do that. If I feel in my heart I shouldn't do that, that's the way it should go down, right? So that's a whole other topic, which I talk a lot about, is support networks. I know you mentioned that in your book as well.
Did you just see Isla and Sasha have just filed for divorce? Well, they're back in 2023, but they just came out with a statement. Now that is a class act, those two. You know, Sacha Baron Cohen, the comedian. They posted on Instagram a picture of the two of them, like in their tennis whites. Well, this tennis match started 20 years ago, but we've decided to hang up our rackets. But they've just, and this has been something that obviously they've got 3 children. They've done it so privately. It's been in process.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be very interested to follow. I know, not that there's going to be a lot out there about it because they are very proud of it, but I feel again, to your Gwyneth Paltrow, conscious uncoupling, that the fact that they're showing a way that it does not have to be this massive contentious. They filed for divorce in 2023, and then here we are 6 months later, and they're posing in their tennis gear with a message that they've shared on Instagram saying, "Hey,
And there have been a couple of other celebrity couples who have done that. And I think it's wonderful, because what I think divorce should be about is there's this we, and it's becoming these two me's. And I believe that, and that is a big trauma to leave this. This is comfortable, and it's, probably been together a long time, and to separate and become these two individuals. And I love that idea of supporting each other in this, because we're both splitting from this. And if we both support each other, it's a beautiful, wonderful thing. And, if one spouse is upset or, blaming, then that spouse needs to get help in understanding how to love themselves. Because really, when you blame the spouse, my life isn't going well, it's all her fault, it's all his fault. And I see a lot of that. That means that you're just not in touch with you, and you don't know yourself, and you don't love yourself. And so you need to do the healing work. But I think that when we are these people who have, like the couple you mentioned, and there's another couple I'm thinking of as well, have really shown that they want to support each other. This has been great, and I love chatting with you. And thank you so much for sharing your story. Once again, your book is available on Amazon, and it is A Modern Family: Keeping the Family Intact When the Marriage is Over. And why don't you tell people where they can reach you, your website, so that they can learn more about you?
Very easy. It's helenagotto.com, HELENAGOTO.
Great.
And, my email's the same, helena@helenagotto.com.
Fantastic. And I'll put that in the notes for those who are listening on audio, as well as the book title, so you can check that out. And thank you so much for being here. It's been fun. It's gone by so fast, and we could probably talk for another hour, but I really appreciate it.
I could definitely, because I feel like there's so much commonality in what you're doing. And
yeah, but thank you for coming, and we'll have to maybe do it again down the road and see how things are going for you.